A strange death of Joshua Maddox, missing teen's body found in chimney. These headlines appeared in Colorado newspapers in September 2015. How can you not remember Edgar Allan Poe's famous Murders in a Rue morgue, where a brilliant detective solved a case in which one of the murdered women's bodies was stuffed into a chimney above the fireplace by the killer? But in this case, the police detectives weren't nearly as successful or persistent in finding the culprit. And was there even a criminal? Fair warning, young detectives, if the thought of being in enclosed spaces makes you anxious, after watching this story, that feeling might get much worse. For 70 years, Mike Maddox searched tent camps, homeless shelters, and bus stops in Colorado Springs, checked campsites in Pike National Park forests, and looked into strangers' faces on the street, hoping to recognize his missing son Josh. For a long time, every time the phone rang, I expected it to be the morgue or police. Once they found a body in New Mexico and I thought it might be him. It's just a waiting game, and you've got an empty chair at the dinner table and an empty space in your heart, Mike said. He and the family hoped that the cheerful guy who loved to sing and play guitar would come home one day. Even after the divorce, Mike Maddox kept his house in Woodland Park because he thought it was the only place where his son could find him if he returned. But on August 7, 2015, the worry and waiting ended after workers began demolishing an old forest cabin standing among tall pines. Inside the brick chimney, they discovered human remains frozen in a fetal position. This was Josh Maddox, found less than a half-kilometer from home. The family had imagined he could be anywhere in the world. No one could have thought of this. "I nearly had a heart attack," said his father, Mike Maddox. "For many years there were tears, prayers, hopes, and dreams waiting, and suddenly you feel like you're falling from a roller coaster. He was such a wonderful boy, the kindest, best, brightest boy." The discovery shocked Woodland Park, a town of about 7,500 people located 30 kilometers west of Colorado Springs. Residents remembered when Josh disappeared. Everyone knew him as a sweet kid with a friendly smile and kind heart. When the answer to where the missing teenager was found, a new question arose: how did he get there? Joshua Josh Vernon Maddox was born on March 9, 1990 in Woodland Park, Colorado, into a typical middle-class American family. Michael Albert Maddox and Roberta Bertie Schmer raised 4 children, daughters Kate and Ruth, and sons Zachary and Joshua. Josh was the youngest of 4 kids, did well in school, and was well liked by his classmates. He was outgoing and friendly. He was homeschooled for a few years, but then went back to regular school. Josh was creative, and in his free time he loved listening to music, writing poems and songs, and playing guitar. His sister Kate said about him, his IQ was off the charts. He spent most of his time writing stories and doing music. He had an interesting and unique sense of style. The kids in his high school class knew him as the cool guy who wore a hat and carried a briefcase instead of a backpack. He had this subtle sophistication that made him interesting and special. Josh was a mischievous teenager with a great sense of humor. Once he interrupted a high school debate by jumping on stage and declaring himself a candidate. Another time, he dressed up in white robes and shocked from the audience into the school choir during a performance. So Josh was free-spirited with a touch of adventure. He loved spending time in nature and felt deeply connected to the world around him. He longed to go on a big adventure with just the mountains, pristine forests, and himself, just like Christopher McCandless. The nature in town, located in Teller County near Pike and San Isabel National Parks, was perfect for hiking and forest adventures. The teenager's life was fun and full, but suddenly sad changes hit the family. A tragedy happened with Josh's older brother Zachary. The two were very close, loved fishing together, and were partners in crime in all their pranks. Sadly, in 2006, Zachary died by suicide, just a week before graduating high school. This left a deep wound in his brother's life. Josh never got over not noticing that Zach was struggling with depression. Josh's father talked about the situation when his second son went missing. "I buried his older brother 2 years ago, and Josh took it so hard. When his brother died, it pushed him to the edge. It was a huge shock for the family and a huge shock for Josh. He really looked up to his older brother. But according to the family, Josh was happy despite being deeply affected by his close friend's suicide. Although he became more introverted and quieter after the incident, he tried hard to live the normal life filled with nature and music. Mike and Roberta's marriage ended and Josh stayed living with his father and two sisters. As months turned into years, the family's fear for the smart young man's fate grew. Josh often kept to himself and took long walks alone. Josh was a free spirit, and he always told us he was headed for a big adventure and might not be in touch for a while, said Josh's older sister, Kate Maddox. When he said a while, we thought maybe he meant a few years. On May 8, 2008, 2 years after his brother's death, Joshua left and never returned. The last person he talked to before leaving home was his sister Kate. He told her he was going for a walk like he had many times before, but this time he didn't come back in the evening like usual. His family tried contacting him, friends, neighbors and relatives to get information about where he might be. They also checked homeless shelters and hospitals but found nothing. After 5 painful days of unsuccessful searching, Josh's family finally reported him missing to the police. Now, many might think it's strange that his family took 5 whole days to report him missing. They lost crucial time that could have saved him, but the family had their reasons, rational or not. His sister Kate said, since Josh had turned 18, it made sense to think he might have decided to leave town to start a new life. I expected Josh to return to Dad's house anytime with the wife and little kids so they could meet their grandparents and 2 aunts. Josh was always known for his musical and writing talents, so maybe we'd one day discover him playing music in a touring band or writing famous novels under a pen name so no one would disturb his preferred solitary lifestyle in the forest. Josh was a kind kid who showed no signs of despair or depression before he disappeared. And of course, the family couldn't imagine anyone would want to harm him. On one hand, he should have been fine since he was comfortable in nature, but on the other hand, he'd never disappeared for so long before. The family truly believed Josh left on his own, and it took them 5 days to start considering other possibilities. It's hard being a parent, Mike said. You try to raise your kids, and when they turn 18, they seem pretty grown up, but they are not. They still need help. On May 13, 2008, Michael Maddox called the police. I woke up in the morning and Josh was home, and then he just vanished. The next day he still hadn't come home. I called all his friends. Nobody's seen him. Nobody knows where he is. I don't know what to do. What's worse, the police didn't take the report seriously. Officers thought Josh could have gone anywhere since he was an adult and didn't have to tell his family where he was. In other words, they figured he just left home to start a new life, though without his belongings and favorite guitar. They didn't suspect anything criminal and just followed standard missing person procedures. So the police began searching every corner of the national park, and soon posters appeared around town saying, "Missing person, Joshua Vernon Maddox, missing since May 8, 2008, last seen in Woodland Park, Colorado, height 6 feet 0 inches, weight 150 pounds, sex male, eyes brown, hair wheat blonde, marks, scars on left and right arms, left wrist mole on chin, mole on back, missing finger." Josh had lost part of his right index finger in a childhood accident. It was amputated after getting caught in a bicycle chain. After searching the forest, the police ran out of ideas for finding the young man, and Josh's parents were desperately searching for any clues that might lead them to their son. But days, weeks, and months went by, and the missing guy's whereabouts remained unknown. Police began to suspect he might have harmed himself because his brother Zachary had died by suicide earlier. But his friends and family insisted Josh was too happy and well-loved to do that. In the past, Josh hadn't shown signs of mental illnesses, had no enemies, and no problems with alcohol or drugs. The search continued for 7 long years until that horrifying discovery in the chimney of a cabin 2 blocks from the Maddox family home on Meadowlark Lane. If you look at Meadowlark Lane on Google Maps, you can see the cabin in 2012 photos still keeping its terrible secret in the chimney at that time. The now demolished cabin where the remains were found had an interesting history. Once it was a place where gamblers tried their luck, ate and enjoyed can-can dancing. The place belonged to a local mobster Big Bird and was called Thunderhead Ranch. In 1950, the Denver Post claimed that illegal casinos are operating full blast in Woodland Park, and the former Colorado governor's biography detailed several casinos like Thunderhead Ranch, where the governor sent his attorney general to take whatever steps necessary to stamp out gambling. The cabin later became part of the Murphy family history when Chuck Murphy, a developer from Colorado Springs, bought it in the 50s. His brother lived in the small place until 2005, and since then the cabin had been empty. On Friday, August 6, 2015, 80-year-old Murphy and his crew started demolishing the cabin to clear space for future development. The excavator was breaking down the chimney from outside, and around 2:30 p.m. they made the horrible discovery. There, in the darkness, lay a mummified human body. Murphy's construction crew saw that the body's knees were higher than its head. The legs stripped of flesh were separated from the torso. One arm was near the face, the other was invisible. They could tell it was a young person with light hair. Photos of the body aren't available to the public today. Murphy immediately called the police, and police officers and the county coroner arrived with forensic experts. Joshua was identified by dental records and his missing right index fingertip. The body examination results shocked everyone. The report said Joshua's body showed no signs of drugs, in fact no signs of anything at all. History knows people who've gotten stuck and died in chimneys. It's happened and sadly still happens for various reasons. Burglars, lovers, just reckless folks get trapped. In the past, child chimney sweeps whose masters forced them to climb inside chimneys to clean out soot and other debris face a real danger of staying in the chimney forever. But what happened to Joshua? His death was an instant, said County Coroner Al Bourne. We can only guess how he died, but we know he didn't die from starvation because that takes many weeks. Going down the chain, dehydration comes earlier, which can take just a few days, and even faster, hypothermia, which can take a day or two. We don't have evidence to say which cause was the main one. Most likely it was an accident, since there are easier ways to commit suicide than climbing down a chimney, concluded the Teller County coroner. And so young detectives began a story that could be called a locked room mystery. The crime scene gives no hints about how the victim died. Was there a criminal? How did the body get where it was found? This story stirs the minds of many mystery lovers, but before diving into the sea of assumptions, let's establish the main facts. First, the body was in the chimney in a fetal position, knees above head. The hard tissues showed no signs of any trauma, no broken bones, no signs of gunshot or knife wounds. Second, Josh was wearing only a long-sleeved thermal undershirt that people usually wear under clothes for warmth. So he was naked below the waist. His clothes, including socks and shoes, were found in the cabin by the fireplace, neatly folded. Third, the entrance to the chimney from below was blocked by a massive wooden bar counter that had been moved there from the kitchen. The cabin stood apart from other houses, 15 meters from the road, so it's unlikely anyone could have heard the guy's cries for help. Police, the Teller County Coroner's Office, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation concluded that the guy tried to enter the cabin through the chimney, just like Santa Claus, and died from unknown causes. Most people aren't familiar with how fireplaces and stoves are built. We think it's just a hearth and a straight chimney pipe, but actually the fireplace structure is a bit more complicated. Chuck was sure Joshua was murdered, either driven into the chimney alive, locked in and left to die, or killed in the cabin and his remains pushed through the damper into the smoke chamber right above the hearth. He believed that if Josh had decided to climb down the chimney, he must have understood he couldn't get back out the same way. The steel structure inside the fireplace would prevent it, and he would never go down there voluntarily. Murphy didn't believe in an accident also because of the chimney cap with mesh installed on top to keep animals out, presumably something like this. There was a row of brickwork around the cap. This guy couldn't have gotten into the chimney through that steel mesh, he didn't climb down it, said Chuck Murphy. Bourne responded that the mesh had rusted or corroded and disappeared. He stated he saw no evidence of mesh in the crime scene photos. Murphy objected that when the body was discovered, they had already started demolishing the cabin and the mesh had been removed and taken to the dump. Murphy also got suspicious about the furniture blocking the chimney entrance from below. Who moved the bar counter there and when, nobody knows. But someone really tried hard to tear the massive wooden structure from the kitchen wall and drag it to where it was found. The counter was also why Murphy didn't look in the fireplace during his rare visit to the cabin, and he didn't stay in the cabin long anyway. It was damp, Murphy said. Smelled awful. There were raccoon droppings everywhere, chipmunks and mice running around. Only later did Murphy realize the true cause of the smell. If it weren't for Murphy's plan to develop the land, the body might never have been found. The owner had no reason to come to the cabin except to demolish it. Rumors that Josh was killed by being forced into the chimney quickly started spreading around town. People noticed strange things. For example, some of Josh's clothes were found inside the cabin and he was wearing only a shirt with the rest of his clothes outside the fireplace inside the cabin. So according to police, he decided to climb into the chimney in just a shirt without underwear or pants? How could Josh's clothes end up inside the cabin if he got stuck before entering the building? He was already inside, which makes it doubtful that he climbed into the chimney to get access to the cabin. No footprints or handprints were found in the suit, maybe because too much time had passed. The body was found head down, but who climbs down a chimney head first? Because of these questions, and after a 2-hour conversation with Chuck Murphy, 3 days after the first examination, the coroner conducted a second autopsy. He commented that it would have taken 2 people's efforts to place him in the position he was found in. And again, without other evidence, the autopsy report stated the cause of death was accident, homicide, or undetermined causes. This is just a treasure for those wanting to draw their own conclusions from what happened, and Bourne couldn't have been more vague even if he wanted to. But we need to understand that the coroner distanced himself from trying to theorize about what happened without specific evidence. The police planned to close the case as an accident, but townspeople didn't want that. People kept telling officers that someone had allegedly bragged about killing Joshua. Once in an Ask Reddit thread, there was a question about what it was like to discover someone you know is a serial killer. A user named Gentamangina responded with a long comment describing how they not only knew Joshua when he was alive, but possibly also knew the killer. I went to high school with a skinny hippie jerk named Andy who played guitar in a band. I was never good friends with him, but about a year after graduation, one of my good friends, Josh, started hanging out with him and then disappeared. Last I heard, Andy was telling another friend, "Yeah, Josh and I spent a lot of time together. We were planning a trip to New Mexico." In the same thread, the author also claimed that Andy swore he put Josh in a hole. Who's this killer Andy that the angry author wrote about? Andrew Richard Newman was a California native who became a drifter after high school. He had an impressive criminal history, and it was a worrying sign that Joshua was hanging out with him. In 2009, Andy was in New Mexico. He stayed with his friend James Velito. James was taking care of a disabled person and everything seemed fine until one day James went to take a shower, and when he returned, he found the disabled person stabbed to death and Andy was nowhere to be found. Later, Velito himself was killed in a bar during a drunken fight. People said that it was Andy too. Besides killing the helpless disabled person, Andy confessed to killing another woman in New Mexico and committing burglary in Florida. However, New Mexico police had already arrested another person for the woman's murder and charged them with the crime. People were simply shocked now. It seemed like the police didn't care. Is there any hope for justice in Joshua's case? Joshua's family and friends did everything possible to reopen the case and start an investigation into Andy. There were rumors that during the time Josh disappeared, Andy was using methamphetamine. Although Andy Newman was never charged with Joshua Maddox's murder, Andy repeatedly visited Florida state correctional facilities with arrest reports showing charges such as drunk and disorderly conduct, grand theft, and battery. While in prison in 2019, Andy got additional time for attacking 3 officers. He hit one of them in the face with his hat when they fell to the floor during a fight. damaging the officer's eye. With such a criminal background, it would seem there is no doubt about Andy's guilt. In the same post, the unknown person also talks about the police's attitude toward the Maddox case. Some of us went to the cops saying, "Hey, missing Josh was last seen with killer Andy, maybe you should check him out." Despite us pestering them multiple times, nothing came of it, and by nothing I mean the police mostly didn't even return our calls, and once they accidentally canceled Josh's missing person report because he was alive and well and living in a nearby town. Eventually, they closed the case, ruling it an accident. However, if you search well online before Josh's body was found, probably this same classmate, male or female, claimed on other platforms that the police are right to think he is living a nomadic lifestyle, that he is alive and well, and even sometimes writes him a few lines on social media. Should we believe someone writing such anonymous posts? The police, lacking real evidence and proof of anyone's involvement in the case, closed it, and it seems the Maddox family isn't insistent on reopening it. Probably 7 years of searching were too painful for them, and the only thing the family wants is peace and respect for Joshua's memory. The body of Josh was cremated. Kate Maddox organized a fundraiser to cover the memorial service expenses and make donations to charities that help search for missing persons. She posted on the Woodland Park News website, "Sometimes in life our stories don't have happy endings. Sadly, this is one of those stories." Another sister, Ruth, wrote, "He was my best friend and always inspired me to be better. Josh told me to never say anything bad about anyone, and I tried to be like him. He was one of the nicest people I've ever met, and I'm very proud to be his sister." The cabin was completely demolished after police finished investigating Maddox's death. Developer Murphy designed the plot for 32 family homes. It seemed like that was it. Case closed, but not for armchair detectives and curious minds around the world. Many theories appeared, and here's just one of them. I believe the psycho-friend theory. They met at the cabin and there was either consensual or non-consensual sexual contact. And then the friend made him climb into the chimney from outside the cabin and blocked the exit with a kitchen counter and left. One of the suspected causes of Josh's death, which the coroner also believed, could have been hypothermia, or simply put, freezing to death. When body temperature drops below 32 Celsius, heartbeat slows down, blood pressure drops. If the body temperature falls below 26 Celsius, death is almost guaranteed. A freezing person instinctively tries to take a position that preserves heat the most, curling up in a fetal position. Ring any bells? People who survived extreme hypothermia say that as their body temperature dropped, they felt incredibly hot, and taking off all their clothes seemed like a completely reasonable thing to do. This could explain why Josh was wearing almost no clothes. Sometimes, hypothermia victims start hiding in strange ways, in corners, under tables, often burying themselves under furniture or emptied contents of bottom drawers or bookshelves. It's called hide and die syndrome. Maybe to Josh, who was delirious from cold psychosis, the chimney seemed like the only warm place in the cabin. Between May 8–10, 2008, the temperature in Woodland Park, according to archives, dropped to a record -6.7 Celsius. In that case, someone who had no idea about the body in the chimney moved the bar counter. If we assume Maddox was alive in the chimney when he got stuck, he might have died not from hypothermia but from positional asphyxia. The position of being stuck in a chimney forces the body into an uncomfortable position, making it hard to breathe. And although there were no signs of gunshot or stab wounds, it's impossible to determine if someone was forcibly strangled when the body is mummified, and there is no way to see strangulation marks or other signs. It's also strange that the body was found partially mummified. This process requires very low humidity, 10–20%, while Colorado averages 52. Plus, a body repeatedly freezing and thawing in spring should have decomposed very quickly, but for some reason it didn't. How did the clothes and shoes remain unnoticed by the cabin owner for so many years? Could he be the killer? According to Murphy himself, after his brother stopped living in the cabin, it was rented out and then they just used it for storage. Could he simply not notice Josh's things among others? Of course he could. Each theory has facts supporting it, but none combines all the evidence together. Maybe someday everything will be revealed, but there is a good chance that the story of the guy in the chimney will forever remain a mystery. So yeah, detectives, write in the comments your theories about what you think of this mystery story and what in your opinion really happened to Joshua Maddox.